It's a pleasure to be here at the University of Richmond and to have a chance to talk with you. In the back there's a little sheet, if you haven't got one, a guide to high impact practices I'm going to be referring to. So make sure you've got one of these, but this will help you. I'm going to talk today about students. In particular, students I've worked with as a window into issues of working with first-generation college students and racial minority students in productive ways for student success. And it's going to be tied to a set of high-impact practices that I think are critical to think about. And so I'll make reference to this sheet as I go through. But I want to concentrate on the students. And so I first drew up a picture of myself with the first student I'm going to talk about, Annalise. And this is actually an article she wrote about our time together in January in South Africa, and a picture that was taken on her, I think it was her iPhone, of us together in Cape Town, South Africa. So I first encountered Annalise when she enrolled in my first year seminar on understanding Los Angeles. She had only been on campus a few days, but she decided to enroll because of outreach to the Latino student community and to undecided majors at USC. Later, I would learn that Annalise had gone through much to get to the University of Southern California where I teach. Her parents had wanted her to stay close to home in McAllen, Texas. But Annalise had wanted to explore more of the world. She applied actually secretly to USC. And her parents thought she was going to UT Austin until early August, when I think Annalise got a little worried because her parents started to put a lot of, in the front yard, a lot of orange things up, and Annalise surprised them to say, in fact, that she was heading to California for college. She was certainly a firstborn, headstrong daughter. Her parents grudgingly allowed her to go, and a few weeks later she was in my class. Now right away I could tell that she was not afraid to speak up in class, yet she kept silent on the fears she had about being away from her family. Since my course was highly interactive, as a small freshman seminar, and we traveled together by public transit to visit neighborhoods in Los Angeles, I got to know Annalise and the other students in my class very well. And most people teaching freshman seminars know that if it's taught in the right way, that's an environment where you really get to know these students. By the end of the semester, she had decided to major in gender studies, a decision made easier by being away from her family and away from Texas, feeling liberated to pick something she cared deeply about without the discussion about what job it would lead to. So my talk today is going to center on work with underrepresented minority students and first-generation college students like Annalise at the University of Southern California. As was mentioned, I'm a professor of history and American studies and ethnicity and the Vice Dean for Diversity and Strategic Initiatives. I'm going to attempt to discuss real students like Annalise who come to college with their own histories and dreams for the future, but often are unsure about how to interact with the many resources that a university environment can provide and how to become engaged learners. So I'm going to use the language of high impact practices. This is a set of curricular and co-curricular activities that have been identified by educational expert George Q and the Association for American College and Universities as having high potential to offer all students transformative academic experiences in college, these 10 that are listed here. More importantly, for my purposes today, these 10 practices have shown to have particularly strong correlation in improving student success for racial minority and first-generation college students like Annalise and the other students I'll be discussing. So it's important to kind of think, on one level, you've got these practices. On the other level, you've got real students making their way through college. So this is the point of this talk. Okay. So towards the end of that semester that I was teaching Annalise, and in the freshman seminar she was taking with me, Annalise first came to me in crisis. Her financial aid had been delayed because of her late surprise announcement to her parents. And she worried that she would need to go home after the semester for good if things were not worked out in time. She was scared. For many students, that first trip home, indeed at Thanksgiving or Christmas, can be critical for their future and their success at the university. I assured her that we would make sure that she would return to school after heading home for winter break. She could come back. And I quickly made a few phone calls to my contacts in the financial aid office. Now, more importantly, we started to work on some long-term plans. This is the end of her first semester at college. I put her in contact with the Latino Alumni Association at USC, whose scholarship program had helped many students overcome gaps in their college support. I also asked Annalise if she would work for me instead of her makeshift work-study job that she was currently in, and I would ask her to put her various talents to work on projects to help other minority students like herself. She agreed, and she started working for me, which allowed us to deal with her emergency funding situation very directly. I could pay her, in fact. So Vice Dean, it's one of the nice situations that I have. Now, Annalise has worked in my office for all 4 of her years in college, and she is scheduled to graduate this May, 4 years in school. After helping me organize a peer support group for students in other first-year seminars, I put her in charge of updating my website on diversity efforts in Dorrance College. You're actually looking at the website that she works on, and she organizes and does. You know, it's always great because the town of undergraduates are much better than people like my age and things like websites. Eventually, this actual work and her thirst for exploration led her to a special USC summer internship program abroad called the Global Fellows Program at the end of her sophomore year, where she spent the summer working on the English language version of a Taiwanese university's website while exploring Asia in her free time. Okay, so her work-study job led her to another program in the summer in Asia. Eventually, she also got hooked on academic research. And Annalise presented her first research project, done under the auspices of our McNair Scholars Program, on the women of the Crystal City, Texas walkouts of the 1960s at a conference in her hometown of McAllen, Texas. So in the audience itself, in McAllen, were her parents and her younger siblings, now all of whom quite proud of the accomplishments of this USC junior. So you see the circle return home. Annalise eventually applied to the prestigious Mellon Mays undergraduate fellowship program, where she did a second research project on new pathways for curanderas, or Mexican folk healers, from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And she was able to travel with me, as this picture indicates, to a Mellon Mays conference in Cape Town, South Africa this past January, to interact with undergraduate scholars from all over the U.S. There was 30 Mellon Mays fellows from the U.S. and 20 from South Africa itself, 3 universities that the Mellon Foundation supports in South Africa. Annalise herself has just gotten accepted to graduate PhD programs at the University of Texas and the University of California, Santa Cruz, and is currently deciding how she wants to take her next step into academia and eventually into the professoriate. From freshman to graduating senior. My own encounters with Latino and other racial minority students like Annalise has been very profound for me. And I've learned much about their needs for access to the best we can offer in higher education, as well as the activities we can foster that can lead to their success in college. As a group, I can tell you that these students are often some of the most resourceful individuals on campus. But they often lack the knowledge they need to know, to actually ask for. They lack the knowledge they need to actually know what to ask for, or who can provide them with needed resources and training. Because our faculties are still woefully less diverse than they need to be, they often struggle to find faculty that come from cultural backgrounds like themselves, but also don't know that many other faculty are ready and willing to help them. I want to offer some strategies to reach them for all faculty and staff from all backgrounds, and lead them to, that might help you lead them to educational practices, experience, and strategies that can improve graduation rates and GPAs, but also success through college and after college into careers and graduate schools. Now let me start by saying a few things about myself in order to put my comments into some context. I myself was born in East Los Angeles in 1959 to two immigrant parents from Mexico. Neither of my parents finished high school or went to college, but they always stressed to me the importance of education. I saw this because they saved money to send me to various Catholic schools in Southern California, where I grew up. My father was an auto mechanic and my mother a bilingual secretary, so I grew up in a working class household where the principal language was Spanish. When I was 17, I got on my very first airplane flight to go to college, to a place I'd never been to, Boston. I studied abroad, really. To attend Harvard University. Now, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. It was almost the only profession I knew about besides being a doctor, and I wasn't into sciences. Long story short, I got very excited by research, and under faculty mentorship, decided to pursue a PhD in history back in California at Stanford. So I've taught at UCLA, University of Michigan, and for the past 17 years at USC. I've chaired several departments. I've been president of a national academic association. I've served on many national advisory committees, and for the past 6 years have been a vice dean of diversity in USC's Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences. I've also produced over 35 minority PhD students who are now in tenure-track positions around the country and mentored hundreds of undergraduate students, mostly minority and usually the first in their families to attend college. So Annalise's story was one that I had seen before. I realized that although she boldly went beyond her own family's desires, she still needed guidance on how to maneuver around a large and complex institution like USC. And for many capable students, their first crises are about financial aid, or homesickness, or getting the right classes. All things that go beyond the usual faculty member's toolkit. I had learned over the years that I needed to know who to call in financial aid and in other student service offices in order to better serve the students I cared about. Though much of my initial commitment to students like Annalise came from my own background, remember my own struggles at Harvard, I have also had years of experience now helping other students where I had learned much about how the university functioned. And I think this is something that we ought to do a better job of training faculty, which is who to call for what kind of issues when you have that interaction. Not to become the experts in financial aid or student meltdown or whatever it is, but knowing who to call and what resources are available. Addressing the needs of students like Annalise requires that we move beyond individual attempts to reach out and help and towards more institutional approaches to fostering student success for those from all backgrounds. For me, being committed to scaffolding high-impact practices of intellectual engagement and learning through an undergraduate career is critical for any institution, including this one, the University of Richmond. You'll notice that I first got to know Annalise in a first-year seminar, one of those high-impact practices. And having tenure-track faculty regularly teach these to entering students is critical, as is preparing faculty with the knowledge of university services and resources. I was able to direct Annalise to establish programs for undergraduate research, and she took advantage of an existing program for foreign internships in a critical summer in her own development. Work study was not, and it didn't have to be simply a job, but an active learning job that got her excited about a career as a faculty member helping other minority students. And every year, Annalise was able to participate in learning activities that went beyond the official schedule of classes, making her coursework, in fact, more meaningful and purposeful to her. So these scaffolding practices are what I want to focus on. And you'll see that even in the list of 10, they're done in such a way that you sort of move from freshman year through the middle, including civic engagement, service learning, internships, and then capstone at the end, seniors. And this is very important, that it's not one activity done well, but it's one activity that leads to another activity that leads to another that gets them all the way through in terms of engaged learning. Imagine a freshman so excited by their great first-year seminar, but when they turn to their sophomore year, can't find anything, doesn't know where to go. Or a student that all of a sudden discovers in their junior year that undergraduate research is great, but what's happened in the first 2 years when I was just taking courses and didn't know any of this, right? You want to be able to try to scaffold and hand off students from one activity to another all through those years. Now, how might you assess your own university's capacity to serve racial minority and first-generation college students as they enter your campuses? Now, basic demographic data is certainly the place to start. How many of these students do you currently serve? What does the future look like in terms of your potential new students of the future? So I did a little research when I had a few hours this afternoon. In Virginia, as of 2010, I'll start with just Virginia. I'm here. I always like to learn about something. The white population has fallen to 68% of the state's population as of 2010. And it's even less among the young people in the population of the state of Virginia. Close to 20% of the state, according to 2010 census, is African American. 6.5% of the state's households speak Spanish as their primary language. And 5% in the state's population is Asian American. Okay? So this is Virginia's basic numbers, something I always pay attention to. While these percentages are not as high as in Texas and California, places I'm very accustomed to, where the majority of the state's school population is currently Latino. The majority in both Texas and California in the K-12 schools are Latino. These demographics shifts probably played a critical role already in Virginia's close recent elections, already having an impact in the future of Virginia, and clearly will have an impact throughout the state and its educational system. All in all, these racial ethnic groups, in these racial ethnic groups that I'm talking about, are high percentages or higher percentages of low-income first-generation college students. So all of these things are sort of what I'm discussing, and this demographic transition is important for all. So I ask, if we do not serve these students well, many of our colleges are likely to shut down or be highly ineffective in the services we provide. And as one analysis has found, quote, experts feel it will be impossible for the United States of America to meet its future economic and workforce goals unless educational attainment levels for first-generation college students are improved. And everybody is saying this out in the real world. Our universities have to do a better job with these students. But our capacity as institutions also need to account for the teaching and student services staff. How diverse is our faculty and our staff? How many were first-generation students themselves from all backgrounds? Even more importantly, how many are prepared to work with students from these kinds of households and those who are first in their families to attend college? What kind of experiences do they collectively have that can be leveraged to affect programs for incoming students? How do we effectively share this valuable expertise among a wider group of faculty and staff from all backgrounds? Now let me say, before I move on any further, there's just a couple of terms that I think are important to put on the ground, and I know that there are problems with all these terms. We know, for example, that first-generation college, which colleges are now using, is a cover term for basically low-income students or poor students. They're not equivalent. Not all low-income students are the first in their families to go to college, and not all first-generation college students are actually low income. But that's what the terms we're using. So I'm going to refer to that, but know that they're not the same. And to me, it's a lot like diversity. I'm the Vice Dean for Diversity. It's about race. It's a cover word for race. They don't say I'm the Vice Dean for Race, right? Somehow that's gauche in 2014. Somehow I'm the Vice Dean for Diversity. So we know that there are cover words being used to describe different things. Very importantly for me, not all minority students are first-generation college. So when I say, and I make reference to both, I'm actually pointing out a distinction, which is, I think, very important. Remember, when I say first-generation college, it's very simple. These are students whose parents did not go to college, right? And this is, for me, a key issue in the kinds of approaches I take, because essentially, from a family point of view, they lack the social capital. They lack the ability to go home and say, what was college like for you, mom or dad, right? They lack the ability to get those reference points that often our students require to make the next step visible to them. And I can tell you that at USC, right, we have about 15% first-generation college students. But last semester I taught a course specifically for first-generation college students, had 45 in the class. and at the same time was teaching an internship class where almost no one was first generation college. And just to give you a sense of the social capital, I asked that second class, I said, where did you get your internship? How did you get there? Half of them said their parents. And a quarter of them said, not my parents, but my parents' friends. Okay? So they were getting their internship not from all the 2,000 internships that our Office of Career Services had, but actually from the same network of social capital they brought into the university, right? Little things like that are incredibly important to know if you're going to establish the right network in some of these practices.